So welcome, Commissioner Carter.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Lynn, for welcoming me to the podium. I have to say a very special thank you also to Don Salverda, who preceded me on the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners by a few years, and who created a pattern of work that we do that has endured until today and continues as we anchor our work in community engagement and a focus on achieving the very best for all. We call it equity for our communities. So thank you so very, very much for that framework that I have been able to step into as a county commissioner. I believe that it has allowed us as a Board of Commissioners and as a county, all of us, to flourish even during and now beyond those very, very difficult COVID pandemic years. I know we have not left COVID behind as we are now working together to ensure that we are able to manage through the endemic processes of COVID. But you know, this has been an incredible period for all of us. One thing we have learned, if we had to learn it again, and likely we will again and again and again, is that when any one of us in our community is in peril, our entire lives, all of us, are endangered. We learned that quite well, did we not? Well, it's not. During those two crisis COVID years that we just suffered. And we will continue to remember and abide by what we can do to ensure that all in our community are well, so that each one of us will continue to be. Again, I'm Toni Carter. I'm on the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners. I've been there for 17 years. I hail from Cleveland, Ohio, where I was raised and encouraged to come to Northfield, Minnesota, to the cornfields of Northfield as a 16-year-old graduating early from high school. And sometimes I tell people, well, they came and got me. I didn't know where else I was gonna go. And so I came to Northfield, Carleton College. I stayed, even though it was so snowy. And I'm this little black girl out in the middle of all this white snow. If you've ever been to Northfield, you'll see this big bald spot at Carleton College where I matriculated. And from Carleton, I came to the Twin Cities and I met a guy. And he told me he would leave Minnesota if I wanted to. Here I am. I grew up knowing that the story is important. And so I'm a little bit of a storyteller. And in fact, I believe so much in the story that together with neighbors and community, I started in the year 1990 an organization called Arts Us. It's a tiny little organization that still exists. They won't let it die for some reason. And it functions out of Dunning Recreation Center in St. Paul, right next to Central High School. It invites and has from time to time, more voraciously, young people to learn about storytelling. The reason we do that is because we truly believe that as young people learn to tell their own stories and give themselves the very best part it will make a difference in their lives and trajectories. I am so impressed by the work that this Optimist Club does in focusing on young people, our communities, and ourselves. You know, if we can make the very best happen for each of those arenas, then that really is what building community and enhancing community is all about, isn't it? So thank you for that work. Arts Us introduced me, as we began doing the work of storytelling, to a woman by the name of Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston, for those of you, has anybody ever heard of Zora Neale Hurston? Yay, there's some folks in here who have. She was an anthropologist, a folklorist, an historian, a storyteller. And Zora's books are very much local color and descriptive of the community that loved her, from which she came, from which she grew, and to which she gave back stories. I tell my children and the children that we bring into Arts Us for storytelling lessons that Zora Neale Hurston's mother always told her to jump at the sun. You might not land on the sun, but if in fact you get to the moon, that wouldn't be so bad, would it? And that really is the way I've tried to live my life, jumping at the sun. You know, it is indeed a great aspiration, but you know what better do we have to do than to dream, to hope, to aspire to the highest heights we can possibly achieve, and then to put the work behind it, and even more so the belief that we can get as far as we can go in life. You know, I come from Cleveland, Ohio, but before that, Bessemer, Alabama, the grandchild and the great-grandchild of those who toiled in the fields. I could use the word slave, but in fact, they weren't. They were enslaved. Those who worked hard, you know, certainly, so that I could be who I am today. And every day I pay tribute through, at least I try. You know, sometimes I don't do as well as I should. But I want to pay tribute to the effort and to the investment that they made and that each generation has made in me. I think about the times when from Cleveland, Ohio, my mother and my father, my sister Valeda, and I would travel to Bessemer, which is close to Birmingham, but to a town called Adamsville specifically. And that town, named for the generations of whites who were a part of my family, was the place where my mother's 11 brothers and sisters lived. And we would go there every single summer from Cleveland, Ohio. We would travel by car. And when we came back from that town, my grandmother would have packed shoe boxes full of chicken and other things, some vegetables, but pound cake. I remember chicken and pound cake. And on the road back to Cleveland, Ohio from Adamsville, Alabama, we were quite self-sufficient. We could eat that chicken and that pound cake, and my sister and I ignored everything else in the middle. You know, it wasn't just that it was good, and it was good for us, but it was necessary because we couldn't stop along the way, you see, and go and eat in a restaurant, at least not respectfully. We would be sent around to the back And our car would have to pull up to the back and wait behind countless others who were waiting to be served when there was time to take away from the tables inside. And my grandmother just thought that we didn't need to do that. And so she would send us with those shoe boxes with wax paper and that chicken and pound cake. And so we didn't have to stop. Now, we did have to take potty breaks. And those were sometimes difficult. I remember we left my sister in the bathroom once and had to go back around to get her. I don't know what that was about. It happened. But the point is, we had to do what was necessary because we had our own dignity and respect for ourselves. We were writing our own stories and giving ourselves the very best part. That's what that chicken and pound cake in the box was all about. And as we've grown through the generations and time, I remember my mother telling me, when you go to the store, you get a sack and you don't pay and beg too. I also remember my mother saying, nothing beats a fail but a try. She paraphrased, or maybe Einstein paraphrased her. She paraphrased a very, very important principle that we can do whatever our hearts tell us and allow us to set out to do. There is no impossible. I don't know why I got into that, but let me say this. Optimist, to me, is a principle and a way of life. It is. And if you allow me to, I'll remember where I was going if I can just share this poem with you. It comes out of my tradition, my and my sister's traditions of working together within a Cleveland and Southern Baptist framework. We would always work together. We were a duet. She would sing alto and I would sing soprano. And we wrote stories together or poetry together. And so this is one of ours. Give your smile away. It won't cost you one dime. Give me yours and you take mine. Smiles are like sun rays. They glow and they gleam, and they carry a warmth like a human beam. Give your smile away. It comes from God above. I smile because I know that God is love. Thank you for letting me do that. Just kind of grounds me. So I want to tell you that positive way of thinking, just comes from those relatives I talked about, those 11 brothers and sisters that my mother had, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, who we called Big Mama, and from my visits to Adamsville each year, and from seeing that out of toil came such productivity, out of a history of degradation. My family, the children of my Big Mama, rose. So many of them became teachers. Many of my mother's brothers were miners. They worked in the coal mines, or the O mines, as they say. You have to put that R in, but they didn't. They called them the O mines. My grandfathers were O miners, as were my uncles. And sometimes when we'd go to Alabama, we'd go to my grandmother's house first, but my Uncle Bruh lived right next door. And so we would quickly find ourselves on the porch with those 20, 30 cousins that would come around from other areas of the pathway that made up Adamsville. And they would sit together with us, and my Uncle Bruh would take his leg off. Yes, he did, because he had lost a part of his leg in the O mines. And he would remove that prosthetic leg and set it on a chair, and he would begin to tell us stories because we were all gathered around this porch that sat on stilts above the ground. And he would tell us Brer Rabbit stories and, all kinds of stories. But I remember one that he would tell, and it was called Hanka, Hanka, Hanka. I'm sorry, you guys. I just apologize that I'm telling you these crazy stories. But you got to hear them because I'm here. He would say, Hanka, 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 on my way to Danka, Mama told Sally, up on the hilltop, swang, boy, swang. And we'd listen to these songs, and then he would say something like, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 angels at my door. I got up, let them in, hit them on the head with a rolling pin. Are you ready? So these were the songs that we would play, We would be going around playing with these songs and singing them and imitating my Uncle Bra. And you know what? It wasn't until many, many years later that I began to dissect these songs, and I realized that Hanka, Hanka, Hanka was somebody hanging. And 5, 10, 15, 20 with the angels at the door. Well, the manner in which we were able to make ditty and song and life out of horrific and horrible circumstance made me wonder, how do a people do that? And I have not yet figured it out, but I know that it happened. And there are certainly images of African Americans that are far less favorable than I am making in my mind that have to do with the ability to, beyond such stress and angst, anxiety, and duress, make lovely life. That's optimism, to my mind, that helps you to create a framework for managing trauma and yet arriving into a space of today. And I'm just thankful for that ingenuity, for that ability to manage and to pass along the resilience that has enabled me to pass along those stories and abilities, I pray, to my children. So it is that spirit of endurance, that spirit of resilience, that spirit of courage, that spirit of persistence that I believe helps all of us as we endure and endeavor to do the work that we do. How many of you are in government? I thought I saw a number of hands, and it's good to see that there are a number of people here who are in government, but I'm also glad to see that there are a number of people here who are not, because it is you, who actually do this work. I am not here to talk about the many achievements that I, have made as a Ramsey County Commissioner. I am not here to talk about the work that we as a Board of Commissioners have done for you. I am here to thank you for allowing me to serve. I'm here to thank you for giving wings to fly in the work that we have done at Ramsey County. I'm here to tell you how important it is that you have supported and continue to support the work of a board and a county that believes we can be so much better yet, that we have so much more to do. I am glad to be able to tell you that I don't think it's about me. I believe it's about the foundation that you have allowed to be set and that you have supported. That in fact our work is anchored in engaging our community and ensuring that we are listening to that community and in focusing on every child every individual, every neighborhood, every community, to ensure that we all are able to achieve a level of health and wellness and the pursuit of opportunity and prosperity, and to be accountable as a team for making certain our resources, your resources, are used to that best ability. I can tell you about a few things of which I'm quite thankful. One, as indicated already, by the way, in my bio, I could tell that was the bio that was written 2 years ago and we didn't update it. Okay, so there were some things that Lynn was stumbling over like, I don't think that's true today. Thank you for doing the very best you can. I did chair the board in the past couple of years during pandemic. And I am very thankful that we were not scrambling at that point in time to come up with the initiatives that needed to address making sure a community could be healthy and well in all its corners, but that we had done that work with you, with our community, ahead of time. So while we know that during times of emergency, such as we have been in consistently, something typically falls to the bottom, and that is those communities who have done less well, regularly, historically, who have been disadvantaged and disengaged. We were not in a position where that had to happen this time. Undoubtedly, you know, as I do, that as we looked at the circumstances of the disease of COVID-19, we did find that that impacted just as other areas that we measure, if it's health or housing or education or justice systems outcomes or employment, COVID-19 impacted disproportionately those communities that are disproportionately impacted in all of those other areas. Absolutely, low-income people, people of color, people of other languages and origins, people with disabilities, children in out-of-home placement, children who come into our detention centers and spend time in our justice system. These were areas that were most greatly impacted during that time. I'm thankful to be able to tell you that they were areas that we were focused on to ensure that we would be able to address the needs of those who most typically do not find the attention needed. It doesn't mean everything was hunky-dory, but it does mean that we were able to consistently address the improvement of our equity markers as we move forward. And that is a challenge that will continue in Ramsey County. Coming in 2005, a great observation that I made, because I had this guy who I slept with every night who kept telling me, was, you know, you've got to look at DMC, you've got to look at the disproportionate minority contact and confinement issues within Ramsey County. He was a police officer, his name was Melvin Whitfield Carter Jr., my husband, and he told me, that's work you've got to do. So I can't tell you that I could ignore the justice system's impacts on our children. And in fact, I heard not only from him, but I heard from my neighbors who were concerned that more African American males were finding their way to the justice system than were finding their way to college at that time. Certainly, at that time, 1 in every 4 young men was being touched by the justice system before reaching age 18. Well, the bad news is now it's 1 in every 3. So again, I can't tell you everything is hunky-dory, but I can tell you that we are examining our processes and making changes in the work that we do, in the responses that we as adults have to our children so that we can see better trajectories long time for those children. I know that you and I have concerns for what is going on in our community today. You know the impact that COVID-19 has had on all of our emotional and mental systems. And it has had that sort of impact on young people in our streets who can't find home, or who can't find home that is supportive to the extent that it must be. And that is not something that we've taken our eyes off. I do want you to know what we know is that crime has increased over the years, but there are high spikes in certain areas of crime, and we have our eyes collaboratively on those high issues and concerns. I'm not here to tell you it's great, but I am here to tell you that as you look at what is happening in Ramsey County, please support those alternatives that allow us to ensure that when children commit crimes, when young people commit crimes, we are able to help steer them away toward a life of productivity, toward a life of contribution to our community. Please support that we are engaging people in our community, even those who have had those kinds of experiences as young people, in working with those young people. They've found their way beyond, and they can contribute to helping those young people to find their ways out and onto productivity in life. Please support the opportunity for those alternatives to show you young people who are now contributing and who are now giving back to our community. That is what we see. I do also want to thank you for supporting our ability to work with our schools so that young women, some of whom have become mothers early in life, are able to complete their education. You know, that is a window toward opportunity. That gives a view toward productivity and the ability to support oneself and one's children. That gives the opportunity for those developing to reconnect in later years and to be able to support children together. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for supporting, although we are not yet there, our ability to build a transportation network that helps all of us to get to school, to home, to work, to our doctor's appointments and shopping. Thank you for your support of the All Abilities Transportation Network, which includes transit, which also includes making sure our roads are well, and which includes bridges like the Dale Street Bridge, which we just recreated recently to be a connector between communities. These are some of the things that as a commissioner, I have been able to participate in. I've got to tell you again, I give myself no pats on the back, but you have an incredible Ramsey County staff of employees and leaders who have committed themselves to the goals of health and well-being and opportunity and prosperity and prime accountability for our resources, who all attribute their work to those goals and who understand more and more every day their roles in that work and the connection to community that they must provide to listen to you, to understand your goals, and to incorporate those goals in their day-to-day work. You have an incredible team at Ramsey County, and thank you for supporting that team. And our county manager, Ryan O'Connor, who is doing a marvelous job together with deputy managers who could step in at a moment's notice and carry the work until he returns to it. So I want to just, by way of saying, be encouraged, share with you a last piece that I have lived by and that I hope will nurture you too as you continue in your optimist work. And that is, this piece, which is a favorite quote of mine, it comes from a person whose name, who I don't know, but his name is William Hutchinson Murray. He was a Scottish mountaineer and writer, and he was active along with a group of mountain climbers right after, or just before and after World War II. And you may have heard it before. It starts like this: until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance which no man, I'll add, or woman, could have dreamed would have come his or her way. So, in the optimist tradition, I'll finish this piece as it concludes with optimist. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So optimist, begin it today. Thank you so much. I want to tell you everything, but I can't. So I'm certain there are some things that you may want to know that I had no ability to touch on. Please ask. I am so thankful to have a few moments with you for any questions.
Ma'am, are you aware of Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes?
He has a podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I invite all of you to listen. It is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Revisionist History.
Ah,
And it's all about stories. And it's all about memories.
I haven't listened to his podcast, but I'm very familiar with him.
Yeah, you probably read his half a dozen books.
Yes.
Or so, but find his podcast. It is powerful because he interviews people and they tell stories.
Ah.
And the interesting thing about memories, I'd be fascinated to hear more about your memories of Northfield, Minnesota. Carrollton College and the interaction with the people in St. Olaf.
Absolutely.
And so forth. But
I'll have to do a podcast on them. Malcolm Gladwell.
And his podcast.
Thank you so much for that suggestion, for all of us. Appreciate it. Yes.
So as you talk so much about Ramsey County and what we're doing, the concern I have is I know we closed one of our nursing homes recently, made a decision. Many of these people in this room may need senior care, and 2/3 of the deaths now, I think, are attributed to seniors with COVID. That's at least a number I've heard, whether that's exactly
Yeah.
true. So, as we think about that and how we care for our communities, and in particular around that group, do you have any
Insights into that has been a very, very big concern for us. And you will likely recall that there was discussion about those possibilities in years past. Pandemic years were not years in which we could make a decision to eliminate a location for people who were living with us, had been living with us, and could need to continue. And we put that decision off for those years because we couldn't move through. What we saw during that period of time was that we had residents, some of whom moved. We certainly lost some of those individuals, although we did not have a huge pandemic death rate in our nursing homes, thankfully. We had families who made the decision to bring their relatives home. In essence, we saw a great reduction in the population at our nursing homes. And it was not just about pandemic. You know, as we talked with families, we did understand the changing perspective for aging in place that has become a part of our current culture. The need and our community's acceptance of the need to plan and prepare for seniors, and therefore a greater readiness to do so. We also observed that across the nation, counties, or government in particular, had been trending toward closure of those kinds of locations much quicker than we did. We were in the game decades beyond other governments closing down those nursing homes and residences for seniors. And part of the reason for that was because we could not, given the resources we had, keep up with the kind of quality and the kind of presence for those environments to be continuums of care rather than single facilities in an updated fashion. So we assessed ourselves, admittedly, as not the very best runners of senior facilities. As we looked around, we simply could not compete. And that from the perspective of earnings in the industry, as well as features in those areas. So we made that decision, but the question you asked me was about perspective on how we manage to this aging population and the needs of people. We committed that we would maintain as many of the individuals who worked in that facility as we possibly could, because our focus is going to be on providing the support that our seniors need in place or in other residences where they reside, in assisting to help drive resources toward our own and others, toward managing the changing physical environment of homes so that that can provide for, and also making connections to the kind of in-home services that are needed for our seniors to be able to grow and age in their own places as they choose. We also know that the population in those that are run by businesses is not such that we could not find locations for every senior that wanted to live in a facility. And we made the commitment that no one would have to move until they were able to find that resource, and that anyone in our facility who actually had a diagnosis that we understood was terminal could remain there and be there. So it is not closed yet. It is open to those who need to be there, and we are committed to ensuring that it will stay until that no longer exists. Thank you for asking that question. You know, none of this work is easy, and we have to be able to explain what we're doing. Others? Yes.
I'm interested in finding out what you're going to do in the stories of your future. What are you gonna build on?
Oh, geez, you're gonna bust me out like that. Well, you know what? I appreciate that question too, and I can't tell you that I always know the conclusion of the stories. I just tell them. So one thing I do know is that I love this work, And I cannot imagine leaving it. But I do know that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to another. And so I'm trying to find those other yeses right now. And I'm going to tell you guys a secret. One of them is my husband and I just joined the cabin community. And I tell everybody we moved to the projects. Because that's what I found out it is. So we are practicing, moving in and out on the weekend. And more I can see myself becoming totally immersed in that cabin life. Now, I cannot see myself leaving here and not coming back and forth. But I can see myself consulting from my windows looking out at the lake. I can see that real well. Thank you.
Can you tell us approximately where the cabin community is?
Oh, the cabin community is all of Minnesota. You know that, right? But my husband and I found a lakeside cabin on a small lake called Pelican in Avon. Yeah. And it's just an hour and 20 minutes or so away, so we can scoot up there and scoot back pretty easily. Again, I do anticipate working from my window, looking out at the lake, because there's so much work to do. There's so many things that I am concerned with. The work around young people and their trajectories, their ability to grow and be safe and secure. The work around detention and out-of-home placement. Those are areas that I'm greatly concerned with, as well as economic development in this area. There's a lot to do, and the Association of Minnesota Counties, the National Association of Counties, will continue to be places that I will haunt. I don't think they want to see me at Ramsey County board meetings after December 31st, though. So I'll probably give them a break. Yes.
I have a question, and this isn't meant to put you at odds with your son.
Oh, but that happens from time to time.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that. One of the, I've given a speech a number of times to different organizations about a city is a legal entity, and a city has laws and many things that they need to do, police and fire and all of that. But a community is put together by the citizens, and in particular the volunteers, who make up that fabric of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's, as I look around in the community and in Minnesota, we have all these community celebrations across the state in the summer, primarily because we don't want to be out in 2 feet of snow.
I bet I know where he's going.
And particular, and it's not just the city of St. Paul, the West St. Paul organization, their community organization just disbanded because they can't get any support from their city government. The East Side Asian Group, the Hmong Group, Rondo Days, St. Paul Winter Carnival, all of those have had to change dramatically what they're doing because of what's happening and particularly the expensive support that's needed, but being charged an inordinate amount of money to do that. To do a community celebration, which is critical to, I think, to creating those communities. And I just want, is there something the county can help with that? Then I understand the county can't always come into the city, and the city will say, wait a minute, this is our ground, not your ground. I get that as well. So do you have any comments about that?
Oh, you weren't going where I thought you were.
I feared a little bit.
Yeah, I think that there are differences in terms of the legal construction. I agree. But I do believe that a community can be a city can be a community. It's about the way we do this work together. That the city may not always, or the county, bring the resources, the financial resources, for example, but that we can be a part of helping to draw them together. If we listen to what our community is saying and what the needs of our community are, then we will work to prioritize together and address those needs. I think there is a big concern that we do have a lot of needs, and addressing and prioritizing, redoing, reconfiguring how we work on those needs does take some time. I don't know that I have a solution, but I do believe that we have a community that works, and that's what a city or a county needs to be, a community that works. And there are ways for us to prioritize our issues and create the ability to work on those priorities together. That said, if it's really important that we support a collection of activities together because it drives health and wellness for our community in a priority way, then we will prioritize it. But it's going to take you and you and you and you coming together to say this is important. And I think sometimes it's really hard for us to create the energy and the momentum around a festival when there are mouths to feed, and those are the priorities that we are more energized about. So I think things are turning inside out, and that's part of what we see when we don't see the ability for support for something that has happened all the time. We have begun to rely on, or been able to rely on it, and dang it, it didn't happen. There are also some children who have consistently not been fed, and maybe that's the transformation that you see happening. There's more attention here than there has been there. And it's tough. I don't mean to trivialize that, please understand. But as we work through how we do this, and come back to that with a community that really prioritizes it together, I think the community and the city can come together. I'm struggling, okay. And I didn't have to knock my son down on that one after all. Thank you. Thank you so very much. I realize that time is short, but I so appreciate having the opportunity to have this personal conversation with you, and I'll be back. Thank you.
We do. We're going to do that.
Well, thank you.
Commissioner Carter, I'd like to give you an Optimist Creed plaque for speaking today. You particularly have brought out one of the tenets of the creed of thinking only the best, working for the best, and expecting only the best.
Okay.
And you've done this your whole life and continue at the lake.
Thank you.